Hello and welcome to Raider HQ After Dark. I'm your host, Raider. And in this video, I had a specific question on one of the videos, claims for increase, that I kind of wanted to discuss because it highlights evidence and it highlights kind of how the process works. And I think that there might be real value added to the community to, hearing Bob's question and kind of answering it. Now, before we get into it, I'd like to say that I'm going to be ad libbing his question a little bit, and there's going to be a couple of different things I'm going to talk about. So, before I even get into the question, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the current circumstances of Bob's situation, but then I'm going to expand it and give you guys advice and tips on how to make sure you don't put yourself into Bob's situation. Not saying that Bob did anything wrong, he followed the normal process, but there is kind of a tip that I will highlight with the very important flag here, about how to go about potentially making it to where you don't create conflicting evidence. So let's get into it and I'll kind of explain it a little bit more as I go. So Bob says, I couldn't quite get the answer I was looking for out of the increase exam video. If my initial CMP examination with DBQ shows that should have been 100% had they granted me, but I was denied service connection for element 3 is what I'm going to say here. And I submitted a supplemental claim that acknowledged service connection due to Terra. And I was given a subsequent DBQ, and that DBQ awarded me at 60%. How do I ask the VA to consider the first 100% CMP examination without poking the bear? So I ad-libbed a little bit there to fill in the blanks for everybody, but that's kind of how it went. Bob did a claim. They found it was not service connected due to element 3, but he had a really good CMP exam, like DBQ, that was done, showed 100%. Then does a subsequent supplemental claim, awesomely gets awarded the, service connection, but they showed that he got better since the last DBQ. So to answer Bob's question in this, like procedurally, the poop has left the horse and what do I do now type thing, the only way that you can invalidate that new DBQ is if you can find a clear and unmistakable error within it. So the way that this works is every time you go before an examiner and every time that you have a DBQ, that is true. And if it changes between examinations, then it's just that you got better or you got worse, but that is also true. They're both true statements. And the only way to kind of rewrite history or bypass one of these truths is to find a clear and unmistakable error within them. Now, for an examination, what would be considered a clear and unmistakable error? Now, this is going to be the thing I harp on a lot, is that if you can find a VSO that has VBMS access and they're able to go to the document section and they're able to find a document called exam request that happened after your claim submission, but before your rating decision on the for the claim that you want to review to see whether or not the DBQ itself was sufficient for rating purposes, you want to go in there and you want to see what evidence was sent to the examiner, especially if you got a lower evaluation in the exam than previous exams, but you have evidence to support that you should have been rated higher. Now, what's another thing that you can do? If you have evidence of record that meets the criteria for a higher evaluation, and in Bob's situation, like the 100% criteria, if you have that specific information and that information is dated within the time period of this new supplemental claim, then you can do a higher level Well, you can submit that. Okay, so here's what I would do. I would submit that evidence as part, like just send it to the intake center or just make it of record. Then what I would do is I would do a higher level review and say, hey, look, I was this percentage historically, and I meet criteria for it today. I'm going to say that this 60%, whatever that was, that doesn't match my medical reality. Okay. So I'm I have the evidence then that I was 100%. I have the evidence now that I'm 100%. Can There's no time, like nothing has changed. So that's one way that you can combat this, because if you do a higher level review, the DRO themselves, if they find that there was some kind of error involved or a CUNE, they will raise a CUNE to issue. Okay, so you don't have to, because clear and unmistakable errors are very, very hard to organize on the veteran side of the fence. And that's why I suggest a lot of the times that you go to accredited attorneys to do it, because there's certain prongs, there's three different prongs of the requirement that must be met for you to call an effective, clear, and unmistakable error. And it's much easier for you to show a, like in my example that I gave, hey, look, the evidence shows I was 100%. The evidence shows I'm 100% now. That, whatever that was, I can show that the examiner was not given the evidence that was true and factual at the time. So that's a clear and unmistakable error. Could you please raise that for me and just fix it? So that's the first way. Now, the second way that now this comes back to the tips and advice section. So if I had a really good, like let's say I filed a claim, I had a really good DBQ, but they denied me for service connection. And let's say that that DBQ is less than 6 months old, or let's say it's less than a year old. What I would do personally is I would go in and I would, whenever I filed my supplemental claim, if the DBQ is less than a year old, I would file a 21-4138 and I would say, hey, VSR, um, I am claiming a supplemental claim with new and relevant evidence as to the reason for denial. So, whatever that might be, element two, element three, but not element one, because you got a good DBQ out of it. So we're going to assume that you got a diagnosis, because if you didn't get a diagnosis, it wouldn't be a good DBQ. But in your 4138, I would say, hey, VSR, can we please use my historical DBQ dated so and so and so and so, whatever the date is, and say, none of my symptoms have changed since that DBQ. Everything that was in that DBQ is true today. If it is, like this hinges on the fact that it has to be true for you, right? But for a lot of individuals, like if you have respiratory conditions or you have something else, or like diabetes or something, you can go up to a year where there's no essential changes in your disorder. It's staying the same because it's a chronic disability. So if these things are true for you, that's one way that you can potentially go without having to get a new DBQ. And that can be important. And I forgot to put the important thing up here. I'll put the very important thing up here. But that's the tip, right? Like the tip is to know the date of your DBQ that was completed, not the date of your claim, but the date the DBQ is completed, because it's important. Once there's like a smell test for raters. So once a DBQ becomes, in my opinion, over like 8 months, 6 to 8 months, it becomes kind of outdated depending on what it is. But the factual like M21-1 rule is that it has to be within a year. And you can just submit the 4138 respectfully, asking the VSR to, please use the DBQ that was done on this date and time, because it mirrors my current manifestation of symptoms. If that's true, guys, and my dogs are going to bark. And just that's one of the tips that I might use. Now, can the VSR not follow that? Yeah, they can not follow that. Can the rater disagree with that and say, "Hey, look, I need something newer"? Yeah, they can do that. But it gives you a chance, right? Because I deal in chances and possibilities. I'm sure that Bob would have loved to have the possibility to have his or her historical DBQ used. So that way there wouldn't be any kind of, conflicting evidence that's created. But anyway, that's about all I got for you on this one, guys. I just wanted to address this question. It was a really awesome question. And I also wanted to answer Bob's question because they didn't feel like they quite got the answer that they were looking for. So, and I'm here to please. But anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for hitting that subscribe button. We have had an influx of subscribers, and I'd like to thank everybody, for taking the time. But this one's about all I've got for you today. I will be putting out another video about organizing your evidence and how to do so in constructive ways that once again increase the odds of a more favorable outcome. But anyway, that's about all I got for you today. Raider out.